So good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Today, we are studying chapter 4 of Tanya. And so far, what we covered, a little quick review, a little quick recap. So far, what we covered is we talked about the principle that a Jew has two nefashot, two souls. There's two parts of us. It's not just one part, but there's two parts. There's the part that we more naturally are aware of, that we know of, and that's the part that we call the nefesh habahamit, the animal soul. It's the physical part of us that wants to eat, that wants to sleep, that wants to survive, it wants to do good because it feels good. All of that is part of the animal part of us. But then we also have another layer. We have another dimension called the nefesh, the godly soul. And the truth is that this godly soul is much more the identity of who we are as a Jew than the animal soul. But we don't always tap into it. We don't always connect with it. So we're not always aware or in tune with that part of ourselves, which is a much deeper part of who we really are. And part of the effort of the Tanya is to help us learn how to tap into that and connect with it and be able to express it. As we'll see today, we're going to talk quite a bit about that, to express that soul in a way that's meaningful and that really has an impact in our everyday life, in every part of our life, not just the spiritual parts of our life. Because when our nefesh halokit, when our godly soul is dominant, is in control of our self, then every part of our life is godly, it's more spiritual, it's more meaningful, it's enriched, it's better. And ultimately, there's a constant struggle, there's a constant battle between the two souls, fighting over who's going to control the body, because there's only one body. There's only one, play field there's only one brain, there's only one heart. But who's going to express the ideas, and who's going to express the emotions, and who's going to express, and today we're going to talk about the garments, the modes of expression of the soul. Who's going to be the one who's going to be operating that? Is it going to be the godly, the Eloki, or the Behami, or the animal? And that's what is constantly going on inside of us. Okay, so last week we talked about in the mivneh, in the structure of the soul, and we specifically began to address it in the context of the godly soul, although it's true also about the animal soul, but that we'll see a little later in a few chapters. Now we're primarily focusing on the godly soul. We talked about the structure of the soul is in two parts. There's the intellect, the moach, the brain, the mind, and then we have the regashot, the emotions. And we talked there's 3 components in the mind and 7 components in the emotion. And in total, it's 10. And that 10 structure of 10 is the structure of the nefesh, of the soul. And that parallels the 10 sephirot, the 10 divine attributes that God used to create the world, that God expressed to create the world. And that's what it means when we say that Adam, the man is created in the image of God. The image of God that we have is the 10 elements of our soul, which reflect the 10 aspects of God's revelation into the world. That's how we're in God's image. So that was the essence of the soul, or the core of the soul. Today we're going to talk about the expressions of the soul. And that we're going to title with the term levush. Levush means a garment. Why are we calling the expressions a garment? So we all can understand that a garment, in many ways, is a form of expression. The way we dress says something about how we feel or who we are. If you want to express or portray yourself as elegant, as classy, then you're going to dress a certain way. If you want to express yourself casual, you're going to dress in a different way, and so on and so forth. So our garments is a mode of expression, how we kind of publicize ourselves to the world. But that doesn't necessarily reflect the essence of who I am. You can have people that naturally are very aristocratic, right? Very sophisticated, but they choose to dress casual, and you'll never know that, quality about them. So the garment doesn't necessarily tell you for sure what the person is, but it's a mode of expression. And therefore, we define this part of the soul with the term levush, garment. And I'm going to explain in a minute what the garments are. And there are 3 garments. And this is true as well for both the godly soul, both for the godly soul and for the animal soul. They both have these same garments, these same tools of expression. What are the tools of expression? So I'll start from the bottom up because it's what we consider more obvious and then less obvious. So one form of expression, once you have the mind and you have the heart. So you have the intellect and you have the emotions. What do you think is a way how to express that? What's the next step? What after we understand something and we feel it? What's the next step? Action, right? So we'd say action, that's a form of expression. Maaseh, action. What you do is a way how you express what you feel and what you understand. Fine, that makes sense. Then there's another mode of expression, which is speech, dibur. You could sometimes speak about your emotions or speak about your ideas. You don't have to necessarily do it. You can also express them by speaking. Sometimes people don't appreciate that, right? People want to see bottom line, but it's a mode of expression. But then there is a third mode of expression, which seems less obvious, and many would mistake it to think that it's not really an expression, but it's really the process of intellect itself, but it's not true. And that is machshava, thoughts. Thoughts are also expression. Who are we expressing it to? To ourselves. The thought is the way we tell ourselves what we feel or what we understand. Now, the machshava is what we call a levush pnimi. It's an inner garment. It's like, a garment that you wear much closer to you. It's harder to take off. That's why it's impossible to remove thoughts. Your mind is always active and you're always thinking something. You could control what you think, and we'll talk about that as we continue to study through the Tanya. But it's a mode of expression. It's not you. You could think about things that you don't feel and that you don't agree with, that you don't comprehend that way, but you could still think about them. You can express thoughts that are very contradictory to you as an individual, but you can't feel things that are not you. You can't understand something that's not you. If you understand it, it becomes you, right? You start to see it that way. So thoughts is a mode of expression to ourselves. Speech and action are also expressions, more to others. Although both those garments, both those tools of expression also benefit ourselves as well, which is something we'll see later on as well. So today we are focusing on understanding the levushim, the garments, umaseh, thought, speech, and action. These are the garments of the soul. This is how the soul expresses itself. And since we're still focusing on the nefesh halokit, the godly soul, so we're going to discuss this in the context of what are diburim and masim. What are the thoughts, speech, and action of the godly soul? What does the godly soul think about, speak about, and do? That's what we're going to discuss today and understand the significance of it and the benefit that this has on the soul itself. Because ultimately you could say, why does the soul need this? Why do we need to express? Just for yourself, especially if it's the godly soul, right? It's my connection with God. What do I need to express anything? It's really about my soul being a part of God. The godly soul comes from Hashem. And we spoke in chapter 2, it comes from a very elevated and deep aspect of God. It's like blowing, right? It's not like speaking, it's blowing. It comes from deep within. Okay, so what do we need expression? So we're going to discuss that as well to understand the benefit and the impact that the expression of the levush has on the etzem hanefesh, on the essence of the soul itself. All right, we're good so far? Any questions, comments? So far, so good. All right, okay. So the thoughts of the godly soul are thoughts that have to do with godliness, with Hashem. Where do we find thoughts about God? The Torah. The Torah is basically God's communication to us. And when we study the Torah with our mind and we understand it and we think about it, that's how the godly soul can express thoughts of godliness. These are the kinds of thoughts that the godly soul thinks about. The godly soul doesn't think about, what you're going to have for dinner. It's not interested in that. That's not in its world and its realm. It thinks about a Torah thought. It thinks about an idea that is a mitzvah, anything to do with godliness. Those are the thoughts of the godly soul. Okay. Then we have speech as well. When we study Torah, oftentimes we're articulating it, we're speaking it, we're reading it. So when we speak words of Torah, that's the speech of the godly soul. There could also be words of prayer. It could also be words that are connected with kindness, with a mitzvah. You're saying something nice to somebody, you're helping somebody, whatever it may be. These are words, speech that the godly soul engages in. And then finally, we have the action. The action is all of the action of the mitzvot. That's what the godly soul wants to do. That's what it does. It does actions of mitzvot. Now, to understand why the godly soul needs this, why does the godly soul have to think Torah, speak Torah, or prayer, or kindness, or do a mitzvah? Why does it need it? It's already connected to God. So if it's already connected to God and it's already a part of God, then why does it need this? So let's understand a general thing, a general concept about the mitzvot. And through that, we'll be able to then understand and appreciate why the godly soul needs these garments and how it influences and how it benefits the godly soul. So there's something very interesting about the mitzvot, and that is that it's very, very specific. It's very exact. You may be familiar that there are 613 mitzvot in the Torah. The mitzvot, 613. Out of those 613, there are a number of those that are what we call mitzvot aseh. Mitzvot, commandments to do. Do this, do that. Give tzedakah, eat matzah, shake the lulav. Those are mitzvot to do. And then we have a number of mitzvot that are what we call mitzvot lo taseh. Mitzvot not to do, prohibitions. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, right? We have a bunch of things of don'ts. What do you think there's more, do's or don'ts? Don't, very good. So there are 365 don'ts. There are 365 prohibitions of things not to do. And there are 248 do's. There are 248 things to do. Now, those numbers are not just, whatever. That's how it came out. God had in mind 613 for whatever reason. And it worked out, 248 here and 365 here. No, these numbers are very, very specific and they're very exact. And when we understand that, we can appreciate the significance of the mitzvot in general. Because a person could ask, rightfully so, seemingly, why do I need a mitzvah to connect to God? What does a mitzvah got to do with anything? If it's needed, it's needed. If the world benefits, it benefits. But if not, what's the point? Who needs it? I need it. God needs it. What, God needs us to do favors for him? He needs things from us. What exactly is the whole point of the mitzvah? What is going on? So the number, first let me explain what these numbers represent, and then we'll be able to continue from there. So these numbers actually reflect certain aspects of our body. We humans have 248 organs in the body. Ramach Evarim. There are 248 organs in the body. And there's a way how to calculate that, to be able to count, understand what those organs are. But the organs means something that the body has a function to operate. Yeah, I mean, you could live without certain organs, but yes, but they have a function. They do something in the body, right? So there are 248 organs. And then there are 365 veins and sinews. We call them gidim. Those are basically elements in the body that more or less transfer and transmit the blood flow and the nerve system through the whole body. So these numbers are very significant. They're not just random numbers. These are the numbers that represent the way the body functions, the way the body operates. Now let's talk about an organ in the body. What is an organ? An organ, essentially, is what we can call a light and a vessel. Because an organ is a element, a physical material that has within it somehow a unique capability to express or to pump into the body a certain benefit of life force or whatever it may be, right? Whether the heart is an organ, it pumps blood. The liver is another organ, it filters, right? Every part of the body has a certain function. Now, technically, if you were to create that exact same, a replica of that exact same organ, it may not actually work, right? I don't know that till today, science has successfully yet been able to reproduce certain organs. Science has already been able to reproduce, but there are many organs that can't. You can't yet. We don't yet have artificial hearts or artificial kidneys or livers. If we did, we would be in a completely different place. So what happens if you were to create an artificial replica of the organ What's it missing that it doesn't yet have to be able to put that in a human body and let it function? What it's missing is the energy, the or, the light, right? So it's a vessel, it's the kli, but it's missing the energy. Exactly, a form of energy. I'm just using the term light because typically in Kabbalistic terminology, that's what's used. Or vekli, that's how it usually describes it. But yes, it means energy. Kli means a vessel, kli. Yeah, okay? So or ultimately, the organs really are vessels that contain within it a certain energy, and it's able to allow for that energy to flow in the desired way to affect whatever it's intended to accomplish. That's the role of an Ivar, of an organ. So if we take that now and we understand that concept and apply it to a mitzvah, the 248 do mitzvahs, right? The positive mitzvot to do. Each of those mitzvot is an organ. What does it mean it's an organ? It's a physical vessel that contains within it a certain form of energy. And when it's applied in the proper way, in the specific way, how it's designed to be applied, it will express or it will send out that energy where it's supposed to be sent out. So each time we perform a mitzvah in the designated manner, the way it's intended to be, the reason why I say the way it's intended to be is because if it's not the way it was designed to be, you created maybe a wonderful vessel, but it's not the vessel that was designed to be able to accomplish this expression of energy. So your vessel could be like the artificial liver that you created, but it's not doing anything, right? It's not going to function as a liver. So when we perform the mitzvah in the manner that it was designated to be performed, we have created a physical vessel. And God tells us that when we do that, there's a certain element of divine energy that will shine through it, that will illuminate through that vessel. And we have the privilege to do that. Who does that benefit? We know who the organ benefits. The organs in our body benefit ourselves. We could live. God forbid one of our organs fails. It's dangerous. We could be in very severe situation. So we understand who benefits from our individual bodily organs. Who benefits from the mitzvot organs? The benefit is for the whole world. The world benefits. When we perform this mitzvah, we are channeling that energy of God to the world. You'd say, but, I don't see it. Okay. So, it's like reminds me of the story of in communist Russia, there was this teacher in the class who was trying to impose the communist ideas of non-belief in God, and they didn't believe in religion and have any belief in these ideas. So the teacher was trying to tell all the students and saying, there's no such a thing as God. It's nonsense. It's a made-up thing. And she says, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. So you don't see it either. You see God, you don't see God. So if you don't see God, it means it doesn't exist. So one Jewish student raised a hand and says, can anybody see the teacher's brain, right? So not because we don't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean we don't necessarily see the function of our organs either. We feel it, or we don't necessarily even feel the specific function, and that's good. It's good that we don't feel it. Imagine if you felt every moment, your kidney did something. It's like you don't want to feel it. It's better to live without feeling everything that's going on inside. But at the same time, we know these things are happening, and we feel the benefits of these things happening within our bodies. And that's the same when it comes to the world. The world also has a body, if you want to say. And there are 248 organs and 365 veins and sinews. And when we perform the mitzvot, we are facilitating and allowing for the godly energy that the world needs to be able to flow as it's intended to be. And each of us has the ability to make that happen. So that's one idea of the mitzvah that is very, very fundamental to be able to appreciate. We still don't necessarily understand yet how that has a direct benefit for ourselves, although we all benefit when the world benefits. But for now, we're just going to address this point. Soon we'll come to the next point. So now let's talk about the 365 for a moment. So similar as we did with the concept of understanding the function of the organ, and then we can appreciate how that is represented in the performance of the mitzvah, let's talk about the functions of the veins. What the veins ultimately do is it's like a tube, right? It's allowing for the flow of blood to go through the body without being harmed. In other words, you have something very, very sacred, very important, that's very precious, and you want to make sure it's not tampered with. It's not in any way going to be contaminated. God forbid if somebody's blood becomes contaminated, they can be in great danger. So the veins are a form of protecting to make sure that this precious item that you have is going to be safe and be able to go where it needs to go and do what it needs to do without any negative forces interfering or attacking it or trying to, tap into it to draw some of it. Okay, so that's the function of the vein. So it's like a form of protection. The same thing is the idea of the prohibitions, the things don't do. God is telling us there are certain ideas, there are certain forces or elements in the world that exist that want to tap into the special godly energy that exists in the world. And it's our duty, it's our responsibility to protect the energy of God, to protect the holy, sacred, and special blood flow or divine energy that we have access to make sure that nothing negative interferes or compromises it. And the way we do that, the way we protect it, is by ensuring that these safety areas, these prohibitions, are not violated. Because if, God forbid, we allow for one of these violations to penetrate, then there could be a force of negativity that will tap into that divine energy that we have access to try to use it for something inappropriate. Think of it like an infection. So like a bacteria that attacks the blood and then wants to take the blood, instead of for it to flow to give life to the body, it wants to take it to, cause harm or, God forbid, build cells or negative things that are going to hurt the body, that are going to attack the body, right? So the prohibitions that God lists out for us are a way to protect, to maintain that this energy, this flow of God that is going through the whole world is protected and is not going to be compromised or affected in any negative way. And that's what the 365 prohibitions reflect, the 365 veins and sinews. Make sense? Okay. So now let's take this a step further to understand in a deeper way how this concept actually benefits the godly soul. Because we asked before, if the godly soul is already a part of God and comes from such a deep element and such a deep aspect of God, why does it need the mitzvah? So we understand, okay, the world needs it. Fine. So the world needs it. So if the world needs it, then we have to do it for the world, for the sake of the world. But the truth is that not just the world needs it. We need it as well. Why do we need it? Why does our godly soul need it? So there's something very unique and very interesting about the mitzvot. And the same is true as well about the Torah. These ideas are ideas that come from God. The Torah is God's wisdom. It's God's ideas that He shared with us. So when we study Torah, even if we study something that maybe we don't feel has a lot of practical relevance to our personal life. I'm reading some story in the Torah. Okay, I'm reading the story of Noah with the flood. Nice story. But what does it got to do with me? What does it have to do with my life? So first of all, everything in Torah has a relevance. But even putting that aside, let's say it's a story that I don't connect with. I don't see how it ties into me. What's the point of studying this? Well, if this is God's thought, if this is God's idea, that means just like our ideas are not expressions, but they're really part of the fabric of who we are. We said earlier that the intellect and the emotions is the structure of the soul itself. It's not just an expression of the soul. It's something that's really like a part of the soul itself. So when God is sharing with us His ideas, this is really like getting into God's brain, so to speak. And when I study that idea, what I'm doing is I'm connecting my mind now that is occupied with trying to understand God's idea. I'm connecting my mind to become one with God's mind, so to speak. Now, that's tremendous. And that, in a certain way, brings my soul to be connected with God in an even deeper and greater way than where the soul originates from in the first place. And the same thing when it comes to the mitzvah. Although we're saying these mitzvot are organs. They're vessels that can allow to facilitate a expression of flow of energy. But why specifically this mitzvah? Why is it designed this way? Why is it that you have to eat the matzah on Pesach on that night, at that time, to be able to reveal and unleash God's energy in the world? Why specifically this way? What's the answer? That's God's will. That's what he wanted. That's how he chose it to be. Why did he choose this way? Yeah, that's the way. Why did God choose that our liver looks the way it does? That's the way he decided. You know, it has a good function and kind of fits the model of how it's intended to operate. So if we understood the spiritual divine energy that came from the mitzvah, maybe we'll understand why specifically in this way. But all of the mitzvot are God's ideas, God's desires. That's how he wanted it. Ratzon ha'elyon, as we say, the will of the supernal, the will of God. So when we perform the mitzvah, not only are we unleashing the divine energy into the world through that act, we are now connecting with God's will. And when we connect with God's will, that's very, very powerful because that's very deep within the essence of God himself. Think of it in the context of a relationship. If your spouse comes to you and says, I love you, but he doesn't do anything, doesn't do an action. Come on. What is that? What is that worth? You want it to be an action. And what kind of action do you want it to be? You want him to get you something. Okay, so what if he gets you something that he wants, not that you want? Then you don't appreciate it. You want him to get what you want, right? And you want him to give it to you in a very loving and caring way. Because when these things happen, in other words, when somebody does your will, does what you want, the way you want it, it really connects you to that individual in a very deep and bonding way. So when we fulfill for God, so to speak, with that which he wants, not because he needs it, the world needs it, we need it, but that's what he wants, that's how he desired it. So when we fulfill for God, so to speak, that idea exactly in the way he prescribed, we are now connecting to the essence of God. We're entering this deep relationship that is very, very powerful. And that, in a way, elevates the soul to an even greater degree than where the soul could be in its own right, even though it's a part of God. And that's why the word for mitzvah in Aramaic comes from the word tzavta. Tzavta means to connect. Not savta, but tzavta. Tzavta means to connect. And the idea of a mitzvah is to connect with Hashem, to connect with God. So when we perform a mitzvah, we're connecting the world with God because we're allowing for the divine energy to flow in the world, and we're connecting ourselves, our own soul, with God as well in a very, very deep way, which is deeper and greater than through any other way that we would be otherwise connected. Okay. So that's kind of the general concept, and that's the purpose, that's the function of the buru maaseh, the levushim, the thought, speech, and action, the garments of the godly soul are there to be able to facilitate for the godly soul to express itself. Why does the godly soul need to express itself? Because that's how it fulfills its function for the world. And that's how the godly soul can achieve an even deeper and more meaningful and greater connection with the essence of God himself. And that's very powerful. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, let's hear some feedback. Please, go ahead.
So what if you know in your thoughts, you see both sides, you know that you're thinking something and it's somewhat from your animal soul, but then you also see the godly soul side and you try to do actions and what was the third one? I guess like you're doing what you think is the godly route, but you still have those animal soul thoughts in you. It's kind of like telling a white lie, you know? Not that it's points and credit, but is it still a godly full action if there's still a little bit in here that is the petty animal thinking?
It's a great question. So you're actually touching on a lot of details that are going to be discussed quite a bit as we go through the Tanya. But I'll try to address some of the points you're asking about, at least in a short way. So the fact is that, as we talked in the first class, this is the the book, the guide for the Benoni, for the in-betweener, right? Ultimately, the Benoni, the in-betweener, is one who will never succeed in completely eliminating, I shouldn't say eliminating, but transforming the animal soul. That's the tzaddik. That's transform the animal soul. All he's got to deal with now is a godly soul. And the animal soul's still there because he's alive. You know, if you don't have an animal soul, you're dead. So he's alive, but his animal soul completely became a servant of the godly soul, and all his thoughts, all his ideas, all his emotions, all his expressions, it's all only godly. That's the tzaddik. But for most of us who may never make that qualification, and just so nobody feels discouraged, it's not something you can actually work to become. It's if God gives you the privilege to be a tzaddik, you can become a tzaddik. Otherwise, you can't. It doesn't show on your lack of effort or on your failure if you don't become a tzaddik. You're not meant to be a tzaddik. God created some people to be tzaddikim, very few, and everyone else to be able to try to be a Benoni, an in-betweener. Okay, so the in-betweener always is going to be struggling with this reality where you have the godly and the animal soul coexisting at the same time. And we're going to, all of the whole Tanya, everything we're going to be studying is going to be about tools to be able to balance and to manage this internal conflict that we deal with on a daily, ongoing basis. So obviously I can't kind of, give you all of that in one sitting. At this point, we're still first defining to be able to understand what we're working with. Before we get to the practical tools on what you could do and how to do it and so on, we need to first understand what are we working with and what's the personality, what's the structure, what's the definition of each of these ideas that we're dealing with. So once we understand how they operate, then we'll have a better appreciation and understanding how to manage it. So ultimately, whenever you perform a mitzvah, to try to answer your question specifically, if you fulfilled an act of a mitzvah, regardless of what your thoughts were at the time, and regardless of what your emotions were, your ideas, you did a mitzvah and you fulfilled that goal that it was intended to be, which is you unleashed the divine energy into the world. It happened, you did it, it's done. And technically, you also connected with God. Now, that doesn't mean that there is no meaning or there's no significance to being fully in tune at the time that you're doing the mitzvah. You can't compare somebody who did the mitzvah but wasn't paying attention, couldn't care less, didn't prepare for it, didn't think about it, just did it, to somebody who applied their mind and their emotion and they're into it. Like we say, all right, your intent, you're really feeling it, you're into it. You can't compare. Now, what about it you can't compare is not the effect. The effect is going to be the same. But the deep connection with God that the soul achieves through the mitzvah, which is the second part of it, that is going to be much deeper, much more meaningful when you're fully invested, rather than when you kind of just did it. Just like if, going back to the example of a spouse, if you ask your spouse to do something for you and they do it, but they did it in a way that it was very, very clear. They didn't want to do it. They were very upset to do it. And they, bicker about it and still continue to bicker about it. You can't say it wasn't done. The garbage got taken out. It's out. The garbage is out. But hey, that's not how I wanted it, right? It didn't make me feel good. Thank you, but no thank you, right? So the garbage got taken out, but did this deepen our relationship? Not quite. So if you do the mitzvah, it's done. Mission accomplished. The divine energy is flowing in the world. But could you say God's smiling at you right now? I don't know. But if you do it with a smile and you're excited and you say, wow, thank you for the privilege to take out the garbage. I'm so happy to do it for you. Then, the connection, the relationship is much deeper, right? It's a much more connecting element. So that's where, the difference is. That answers all the questions. All right. Any other questions? That's it. Okay. So going back to what we spoke last week about the emotions, and if you recall, we kind of said, although there are 7 emotions, they're divided into 2 sides primarily, right? We have the right and the left, love and fear, ahava and yira. That's the kind of the base of all the emotions. So here he says the following. The emotion, I'll read in Hebrew and in English, so this will benefit everybody. Vehamidot shehein yir'ah ve'ahava ve'anfeihen, which means the branches of the emotional powers of the soul, which are the reverence and love, with their branches. The branches are the other 5 extensions of emotions that are kind of subdivided into these 2. Melubashot, they're enclothed. B'kiyum ha-mitzvot b'maseh b'dibur. They are invested in the mitzvot when you fulfill them through action and speech. In other words, what we're doing is the soul. We explained before, the garment is an expression of the soul. It doesn't identify the soul, but it expresses it. So when you have the emotion and you have the intellect and you want to express it, the way you express it is through the garments. So for the godly soul, the emotions, which are love for God or fear for God, how are they expressed? Love for God is going to be expressed by doing the thing God wants us to do. And fear of God or reverence of God is going to be by respecting not to do the things that God doesn't want us to do. Just like in any relationship, love is not enough. You need to have respect. Respect means to give space, to move back, right? So you need to have both in order to be able to have a healthy relationship. And this is, he continues on to say, Ki ahava hishoresh kol ramach mitzvot aseh. Love is the motivator or the origin for all the 248 positive commands. From the love of God, from the emotion that you have of love of God, that's what motivates and inspires within you to fulfill all the 248 commands. And the opposite of that is the emotion. Reverence or respect, it's the motivator for the 365 prohibitions not to do. Why? Just like the love is like you love God, so you want to do what he wants. So when you have awe and respect and reverence of God, then you don't do the things. Ki yareh limrod, the individual is afraid or revers to violate those things that God doesn't want. Now that's when the mitzvah is being done in its complete form, like what we were asking before. You have your love for God, and your reverence for God is invested in the performance of the mitzvah. But what if you just did the expression and you weren't fully there? You still did the mitzvah. It's just not whole. The effect is the same, but for your sake, the meaning of it is lacking. It's not going to be complete for the sake of your relationship with God. Okay, and I'm just going to conclude with one more section that I think is very powerful as well. In the conclusion of the chapter, the author emphasizes a very interesting point. Many of us sometimes hear of ideas that when you do a mitzvah, you get rewarded. If God forbid you do something you shouldn't, you can get punished. And some of us understand this to mean also not just in our current reality, but also in the afterlife. We have Gan Eden, Gehenom, right? You have heaven and hell. And we wonder, is that what it's all about? So, of course, these ideas are true, and they're truths of Torah. But what the Alter Rebbe is emphasizing here is that though all of these concepts, all of these ideas are very secondary to the essence of the mitzvah itself. Because the greatest reward of the mitzvah is not about what you get for it, not in this world or in the world to come, but it's the connection that you establish with God. That connection is the greatest thing that you can have. That's the meaning of what the sages say, that mitzvah. What's the reward of the mitzvah? The mitzvah. The mitzvah is the reward. What does that mean? The connection with God. And that's greater than anything your soul will feel and experience in heaven, and greater than any physical benefit that you'll have. All of those things are true, and you will have that, but that's secondary to the connection with God. And here I'll just read how he expresses that. That's why our sages tell us in the Mishnah, Yachat b'tshuva masim tovim. It's better 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world, mikol, more than all of the life in the world to come. Why? Because in this world, when you do the mitzvah, you're connecting with the essence of God. The benefit of the soul in the world to come is spiritual blessing, spiritual goodness. But all of that spirituality is only a shine. It's only a ray of the essence of God. While you do the mitzvah, you're connecting with the essence of God himself. And this is what he says. Typically, a person can never connect with the essence of God because God is infinite and we're finite. So we can't connect to the essence of God. But this is the privilege that we have when we do a mitzvah. God allowed himself, so to speak, to be taken, to be accessed through the performance of the mitzvah. And when we do that, as he concludes here, he says, it's like you're hugging the king. Derech mashal. When you do the mitzvah, it's like you're giving the king a big hug. You're embracing, you're becoming one with the king. And in that case, ein hefresh, there's no difference b'ma'alat itkarvuto, in the level of closeness and bonding achieved by the embrace. It doesn't matter how many layers of shirts the king is wearing when you give him a hug, because you're feeling that closeness. Because the king himself is inside. So even though there are layers, meaning there are barriers that we don't necessarily feel or could see that closeness with the king, but we feel we know this is happening. And that closeness is greater than anything the soul can ever experience in the world to come, and greater than certainly any material benefit that we'll have in this world. And that's ultimately the greatest impact of the mitzvah.